Hey guys, what's up? It's Finch here, and today we're going to be doing a special video because we are suspect testing Pheromosa in the SS of the metagame. That is right, the OU Tiering Council has decided to suspect test Pheromosa. We're going to provide some reasoning for the suspect, go through the pros and cons of Pheromosa. You guys might recall that I put out a video on with my thoughts on Pheromosa in more length earlier this week. This video is going to be kind of a continuation of that in a sense. Well, it's not going to be my opinion, as this is more reasoning for the suspect as a whole, and not my opinion as if it's broken or not. I'll do another video for that. It is more just the combination of the community opinion, which we saw in the tiering survey, and this continued posts from that point onward, and also the fact that we really have been seeing an uptick in different sets from Pheromosa that have been really problematic, and we believe that we had to respond to it in a more prompt fashion than waiting a bit longer and seeing how the metagame panned out. So, overall, we decided to suspect Pheromosa for a number of reasons. It's been one of the strongest Pokemon in the metagame ever since it was released with Crown Tundra, of course. The Pokemon was previously Uber's last generation, but it's worth noting, of course, that back then it had things like Z-moves, and there was a totally different slate of defensive counterplays and options in the metagame. For example, there was not things like Aegislash, which could do potentially pretty well against it, but also Pokemon like Tapu Fini and Clefable might be worse in that metagame than they are now, so you definitely see both sides of the coin, but neither here nor there. Regardless, it's a devastating Pokemon with a superb combination of great attacking and speed stats that allow for it to really do its thing offensively despite having virtually no defensive presence. Even neutral hits that aren't boosted can potentially take it out. For example, taking things like a Scale Shot from Garchomp, you're going to die. Hell, even Earthquake can kill you from the strong ground types in the tier, which is pretty funny seeing as it's a resistant attack. If you get Pheromosa in safely, of course, then it can deal lots of damage with the various effective moves it has alongside its very practical move pool. However, for all practical purposes, I butchered that. For all it's worth, Pheromosa is a glass cannon. I'll leave it at that, I guess you could say. Pheromosa can make use of both physically and specially oriented sets. Some sets even running mixed attacking sets, for example, Ice Beam on the on the heavy duty boot set can be used as well. And I guess mixed attacking Life Orb is viable too, but one of the most powerful sets arguably right now is the Quiver Dance variant. It's a set that really flipped my personal opinion on Pheromosa as a Pokemon in the metagame. Why is that, you might ask? Well, the Quiver Dance variant is amazing. It uses Life Orb with boosted Focus Blast in combination with Bolt Beam coverage, of course consisting of Ice Beam and not Thunderbolt, but Shockwave is the coverage move it gets. And Shockwave, you might be like, yo, that's kind of bizarre, why are we running Shockwave with coverage on Pheromosa? Well, think about it. It hits Tapu Fini, it's Toxapex, it's Moltres, and other Pokemon as well, and those are pretty prominent Pokemon in the metagame right now. So, all in all, the addition of Shockwave into its move pool is actually really it bolstered its ability to sweep the Quiver Dance this generation, and it lacks things like, Z Hyper Beam. Focus Blast is able to make quick work of Pokemon that do not resist it, especially with the boost. For example, you will take out Pokemon like Magearna at +1, which is not an Assault Vest set, which is super cool. In addition to that, of course, since it's used super effectively, the Heatran, Ferrothorn, and Tyranitar of the world are all going to go down without a doubt to a Life Orb Focus Blast, which hits super hard. Of course, Ice Beam, though, is able to really hit Pokemon that Focus Blast cannot, such as Zapdos, Landorus, Tornadus G, and also Latios and Dragapult. There's some examples, Flying and Dragon-type Pokemon in particular. Dragon-type Pokemon oftentimes have the secondary typing that resists, such as Ghost, or Psychic, and Flying, and so on and so forth. So, Ice Beam is a great move to have. The Fighting plus Ice combination is really strong. Of course, though, there are some Pokemon that do not mind that. For example, Tapu Fini, Toxapex, Moltres, as I mentioned before. All those Pokemon are hit with Shockwave. In addition, Slowbro is also with Shockwave, although Bug Buzz, which is a viable alternative, gets that, it's Latios as well, so it's worth noting, of course, Bug Buzz does have some merit, but generally you're seeing Shockwave far and away more often than that, so you gotta be careful. But overall, the Quiver Dance set is able to muscle past just about anything that it faces outside of the Fable, and oftentimes it's paired with things that are able to chip down things like the Fable that oftentimes encountered in the metagame. There are a few hard stops to it, though. We're seeing more Assault Vest Slowbro Galar, and Aegislash is seeing a bit more usage right now, so that's cool. The uptick in those Pokemon, definitely largely a reactionary measure to things like Quiver Dance, Pheromosa, so it's keeping it contained, which I'd say goes a long way towards potentially keeping it balanced in the metagame, but then you could argue that these Pokemon are basically only seeing more usage because of things like this Pheromosa, and Pheromosa still completely devours teams that bring a normal fairy type like Clefable or Tapu Fini as their main counterplay, and the fact you have to go beyond that, it could be a bit too much, so I definitely see both sides of the coin. And again, personally, I'll probably be voting Van, and I'll get into that in another video, or you could always check out my Pheromosa video from earlier this week, but I'm just trying to present the suspect thread as it will be. This is a draft of it that I made last night. Actually, 2 nights ago, and I made it 2 nights ago. We also recently added Zachary to the to the SSU Council. He's a really strong French player. He's been playing OU and UU for a number of generations now. And I'm really happy to have him aboard. But yeah, I wrote this up the other night. I just wanted to get it out to you guys. I'm recording this at 6:25 p.m. I just got off work earlier. And now the thread's probably going to go up sometime between 9 p.m. and midnight Eastern Time, GMT-5. So Europeans, you might see it when you wake up. Americans, hopefully it'll still be up when it comes up. And I'll be sure to post this video at the same time. Being able to kind of monopolize this press, because why not? When you're going through all the work of making the thread and writing it out and being on council, which it's a lot of work for me. Might as well get the video up at the same time and coordinate it all. So I've been doing that. I think it's my kind of fun little trick, which is always amusing. But yeah, all in all, back to the Quiver Dance set, because tangents are no fun. It's definitely challenging to conventionally revenge kill Quiver Dance Pheromosa due to the speed. And nothing is going to outrun a +1 Quiver Dance Volcarona. Pheromosa. Pheromosa. Of course, there's Ditto. There's Unaware Pokemon. Although Unaware Quagsire is getting absolutely demolished by a Focus Blast from Life Orb. And on top of that, there's also Pokemon that can just naturally defensively check it, like again, Slowbro Galar and Aegislash. But outside of that, it's really hard. It's either Clefable stays at full health, or you're going to lose. It's its move, and it doesn't have you don't have priority moves. And it's worth noting, of course, things like Sucker Punch and Grassy Lead can do north of 50%. So, say you get a Quiver Dance up taking rocks, take 2 Life Orbs, and all of a sudden it might be in priority range. So there are ways to do that, but even with that in mind, you can still get a couple kills with your Pheromosa. So you got to be careful. Of course, Pheromosa can also run more physically oriented sets such as Choice Band. It's really great, especially when paired with Future Sight. Close combat, U-turn, and then a combination of Poison Jab, Drill Run, Throat Chop, Triple Axle. Pick your poison, I guess. Or, well, if you're not using Poison Jab, then pick your non-poison, if you will. But yeah, no, close combat is able to put a dent for most durable resists even, whereas U-turn allows for Pheromosa to deal respectable amounts of damage while retaining momentum and not having to take a hit because it's very frail, which is important. Of course, this combination is walled by Pokemon like Toxapex, Clefable, Tapu Fini, Landorus, T, and Zapdos, but it has coverage moves to cover those Pokemon. Of course, Triple Axle is great for Landorus and Zapdos, although it does risk taking Rocket Helmet, risks missing, and risks taking Static from those Pokemon. Poison Jab is amazing for Fairy types like Clefable and Tapu Fini, easily killing both with that Choice Band. And in addition to that, Throat Chop or Drill Run can be used for things like Toxapex, and also hitting a few other Pokemon and getting some mid-ground options as well. But they're admittedly a bit less common. Choice Band Pheromosa has some counters, though. You can't deny that. Toxapex can switch into it, even taking a Drill Run, getting Rock Helmet off, and then just switching out. Every team has something to check ground type moves. So yeah, Buzzwole is able to counter it. Even taking Choice Band Triple Axles easily in close combat just shrugs off. So yeah, Clefable and Tapu Fini can definitely be strong checks to it as well. So all of a sudden, it kind of feels like Choice Band Genesect in the sense that it's really strong. Although Choice Band Genesect was definitely better because A, it had the Steel typing, and B, it had Extreme Speed. C, it was much more bulky, but in a sense, it has the same cool kind of same depth of counters. In that you're definitely not strapped for Pokemon that are common that are able to keep it in check at least. So that's cool. But the way it goes is that if you pair it with Future Sight Slowbro, then you're like, wait a minute, none of these things actually really check it that well. Of course, then you're like, it's support reliant, which is super true, but if I am using Buzzwole to check a physical Pheromosa, and they go for Future Sight turn 1, Teleport turn 2 to Pheromosa, then on turn 3, I can't bring in my Buzzwole in the close combat U-turn. No, I can't, so I gotta go to my Fairy type, and then Fairy type gets 2 killed by close combat plus Future Sight plus close combat in the 2 turns that it takes. And that kind of core, that kind of synergy, it really can make Choice Band Pheromosa much more threatening in practice than it is on paper. Now, I will say that I don't think Choice Band Pheromosa alone breaks it. I don't think that's particularly close, actually. I don't think that's a super controversial call. I think that rather, it playing into the overall set dynamic of Pheromosa, coupled with the effect that the Quiver Dance set has, though, that is definitely something that's worth discussing as a whole. And Choice Band set's good enough, especially with the support it can be using, that it still is very much worth noting in this discussion. Speaking of other sets Pheromosa can use, the Heavy Duty Boot set is still pretty damn good in the metagame. It was kind of the day 1 set, but then it kind of fell off a little bit, but it's still solid. You can also run Protective Pads on a very similar set. You don't want to be taking Rocky Helmet and Static and Iron Barbs and Rough Skin and whatnot, which is completely valid as well, given how prominent they are in the metagame. It uses the stab combination on the physical side with close combat and U-turn, and then you can run Triple Axle, Protective Pads, I see that, but Ice Beam is a bit more common. You don't really risk much, and you also do damage to the same Pokemon in a sense, so yeah. Ice type moves are Ice type moves after all. And then you can either run, Rapid Spin or Poison Jab, Drill Run, all very viable options. Just depends what you want to do, wall bind, what you want to hit. You can kind of handpick your hard counters versus your soft checks in this sense, but still a lot of the same Pokemon check you. For example, Toxapex, and always going to do well against your Clefable. I mean, okay, you can 2-kill Clefable with Poison Jab, Run plus Attack, especially, but you got to be careful there. Clicking Poison Jab into the wrong Pokemon just means your Pheromosa is probably going to die. So yeah, all in all, though, Heavy Duty Boots allow for it to pivot in against hazards a lot, which especially is important when you're paired with Teleport. And protective pads, that helps against, taking status or chip damage from the potential residuals out there, so that's worth noting as well. Both can definitely bolster survivability and just effectiveness in the metagame. Of course, though, there are Pokemon that are always going to wall this set. Again, Tox, Specs, Moltres, Buzzwole, as well as the Fairy type, so you definitely not the set that breaks it in my eyes, but a very good set and balanced in utility teams in general, but also compare well with Future Sight. Maybe a bit less effectively than Choice Band, but still. Beast Boost is something that's really important to discuss when it comes to the Pheromosa and the narrative surrounding it and the suspect test as a whole. Quiver Dance sets are super important because you can run Modest, so you get special attack boosts with every kill, and that coupled with the 1 speed boost from Quiver Dance, and all of a sudden you're staring down a Pokemon with like 700 some odd speed and 1,000 plus attack that's gotten 2 kills against your team. You're like, well, this game is over. Click the X button. And that happens a lot. Although it is true that you kind of got to pick your poison. For example, with Choice Band, you want to get the attack boost so you can really start out-damaging resists, but then you want to get the speed boost so you can start sweeping offense, and you can't get the best of both worlds, but at the same time, it's so effective against either or, and so strong regardless, that it almost is inherently an ability that snowballing out of control on something that's so strong as like Pheromosa can be borderline uncompetitive, borderline, too much to handle for a team that's more balance-oriented, and that's just really important. That's something that you have to keep in mind when discussing Pheromosa. Oh, I could fodder something against it, right? But all of a sudden, revenge killing it becomes this retarded because you got another attack boost, or it got faster than this. So all of a sudden, fodder suddenly becomes even a concept that you might want to avoid when facing it. And that's just absolutely crazy in my eyes. That's a concept that doesn't oftentimes apply to Pokemon that we see in this metagame. Normally, you're able to fodder something and revenge kill it, and that helps against checking a lot of glass cannons. A lot of times they're only able to get 1 or 2 kills in most games, and they might be more balanced, but when it comes to Pheromosa, unless you have priority or a more hard check or counter, it's super, super, super likely that it's able to potentially, get multiple kills or even snowball out of control and sweep your whole team, which has happened before. We've all seen it before, so needless to say, Pheromosa is a Pokemon that has risen to prominence in a very punishing fashion, unrewarding to teams that aren't super prepared for it and have to rely upon foddering against it due to the nature of Beast Boost as an ability that can let it snowball out of control. Of course, though, there are some issues with Pheromosa. It is far from a perfect Pokemon, and painting it as one is very unacceptable. You have to look at the pros and the cons of Pokemon like Pheromosa, and the cons are glaring and obvious. It has absolutely pitiful bulk. It is perhaps the frailest Pokemon that OU has seen in recent history, for example. And while it does have coverage in most things, thus making it so that it can 2-kill most things, you're going to need to get a lot of one-shots. Force a lot of things out if you want to potentially have a consistent presence with Pheromosa. As the second it starts taking hits, it's going to die. Things like Moonblast from Clefable will take it out. Of course, it's a super effective move, but even resistant moves like Earthquake from, say, Garchomp or Lightning Stick can 2-kill it, or Grassy Glide from Rillaboom can take it out from 70% if it's Choice Band, and Sucker Punch from Urshifu, from 60, 65%, and so on and so forth. And the fact of the matter is that you have to be careful when using Pheromosa due to the lack of survivability. In a sense, Boots keeping it at full helps against a lot of resistant attacks. It should be able to stomach those, but even then, Pheromosa is just so fragile that you have to be really careful. You can only get it in so many times, and that dynamic alone is something that you have to really keep in mind when playing it, playing against it, and also discussing it as a potential suspect. It's not only the offensive presence of the Pokemon, you also have to realize, how does it get in? How does it make use of that offensive presence? How often can it be untapped to the fullest extent that we discuss? And so on and so forth. Because this game isn't just, a bunch of paper arguments, but rather it's playing through the game. Noticing, okay, I like using X Pokemon because how well it does offensively, but if X Pokemon only gets in 1 time every single game, then it's really going to do a ton every time it gets in. Otherwise, it's just not worth it. It's not worth using, let alone worth banning potentially. And for Pheromosa, thankfully, it's in a metagame with Teleport and a lot of slow U-turns and Volt Switches, and also the potential Double Switch being more likely than not because of the pace of gameplay potentially being a bit slower than, say, more aggressively oriented generation. And Pheromosa is really enabled by that metagame dynamic, the metagame pacing, if you will. But still, it's worth noting because it's still very fragile. And, if you can't one-shot it, then things are going to struggle. As Lesson says, of course, it's still worth noting that Pheromosa's paper-thin defenses can be exploited by most neutral attacks. So if it cannot one-shot things, then it's going to struggle. So in conclusion, overall, Pheromosa is a potent offensive force in the current metagame, but there's counterplay present in the metagame and some restrictions to what it can afford to do. It can be argued that Pheromosa imposes restrictions on how he constructs teams, and that its ability to snowball with Beast Boost makes it too much for the metagame to handle, which is very true. However, some common options are able to minimize the impact Pheromosa has on the game. Pheromosa is naturally strong and fast, but while it does have a pretty good move pool that allows it to hit many things, it's still one of the most frail Pokemon in metagame, and therefore it's support reliant, be it through momentum or just through chipping the checks and counters that doesn't have to take a hit from them. And due to all those points, we believe it's more suspect worthy than potentially quick band worthy or leaving it alone. and we're going to give the people the chance to decide the fate of Pheromosa in SSU over the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to have the specific information like what prefix you need to use on your alts, and the ranking requirements are here, they're staying the same, and also the dates for the suspect test later tonight, which is going to be aka now, because as I post this, the suspect is going to be up. So just check the suspect thread on Buggin. I'll be sure to try to link it in the description below. And yeah, let me know your thoughts on Pheromosa in the comment section. I think it's really cool personally that we're going to be seeing hopefully less Talk Specs and Clefable, because they're basically like the primary counters to Pheromosa. And I feel like a lot of offensive Pokemon that we've suspected have kind of enabled them more and more, but this is the exact opposite. And I think that's an interesting dynamic, so I'm curious to see how that'll impact the metagame if it does go. And if it doesn't go, then I'm curious to see how the metagame is going to react to it so that we can keep it more balanced. And yeah, I'm really excited for the suspect test overall. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, as I said. And anything else you want to say in the comments too. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button. And if you guys want to see more, then subscribe to the channel, guys. We're trying to get to 6K. In addition to that, if you guys want to stay in touch with me through any means, Twitter will be linked below, and the Discord server will be linked there too. Feel free to join. Got a lot of active chat going on. But yeah, I hope everyone has a great day. Stay safe, and enjoy your laddering if you're going for suspect tracks. Alright, bye guys. Peace out.